Hello, this is Joe Welinske, Writers UA, and this is one of my episodes related to talking about things happening in software user assistance. And I'm speaking today with Larry Kunz. And Larry, it's nice to be able to chat with you today.
And likewise, Joe.
And where are you speaking to us from?
I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, where it still feels like summer, but by the time we get to Charleston in October, it's going to be beautiful fall weather.
Well, it's good weather here in Seattle as well. So we have about another month before things start getting a little bit wet again. But yeah, so I'm glad we were able to get together. And You're going to be one of the speakers at our event in Charleston in late October. Yeah, Larry, why don't you speak a little bit about things that you're doing, who you're working for, and the types of work that you're involved with right now?
Okay, I work for a company called Systems Documentation Incorporated, or SDI. We're a worldwide consultancy for technical communication, e-learning, user assistance, pretty much any customer-facing content. And we go into clients who ask us to help them update or fix their processes and their outputs. They realize their customers aren't satisfied, they're not meeting their requirements, and we kind of advise them on the workflow and what tools to use. And then we often also get engaged to do the actual content creation work. So I'm involved in all of those things at one stage or the other and manage projects. So my day is never dull. Um, Anything from knocking out some data files and data maps to actually writing the content to managing the project team and being a pipeline for information back and forth to the client, and also looking for new business and keeping up with the market. Um, that's pretty much it in a nutshell, if that can be called a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that's quite a bit of activity. So that's good. I think it's fun to be able to do a lot of different projects. I mean that I've been an independent contractor for almost all my career, and so that's kind of one of the fun parts of that is always being able to dig into different projects. And one of the things that personally, I haven't done a lot with my active project work is a lot of uh, managing of a large scale documentation systems. It's certainly something that I've done, and I understand, but on a regular basis,
Mhm.
it's not something that I do with my clients. Generally, I'm handing off ideas and processes that they end up fulfilling. But I think that's a big part of what you do. One of the things that you're going to be talking about at the conference is managing user assistance projects specifically. Maybe talk a little bit about some of the things unique to user assistance that you get involved with in terms of the doc plan that you put together.
Sure. Um, I do really believe in the importance of the documentation plan or the doc plan. And I know that some listeners might call it something else like the information development plan or even the UA plan. But I think there's a temptation, especially when you're doing UA that's integrated with the product, to just say, well, we're covered in the product plan. And we don't need our own document to define our processes, to define our dependencies on the other groups, and things like that. And I think it's a mistake to go that approach. You really do need your own plan that specifically describes the UA, the product that you're going to produce, as well as the processes you're going to follow. Um, because the UA process is unique, even when you're in an agile project, which more and more we are now in software, where you're going to the stand-up meetings every day with the development team and things like that. Your processes in developing the UA are still very different from theirs. And we need to understand that and make sure that that's documented somewhere so that everyone on the project team understands our dependencies on them, our assumptions about what's going to happen and what's not going to happen, and things like that. I tell people that the doc plan is like a contract between the UA team and the rest of the project team. Because really, if the conditions aren't fulfilled, then we can't do our job. And we need to make that very clear. But also, of course, on the positive side, if these things are satisfied, then we will do our job and it will be a good product, and you'll be proud to have it integrated with your software.
When you're putting a plan together like that, how do you define like the scope or the boundaries of your user assistance versus where it starts to get into peripheral areas or responsibilities that aren't, functionally within the doc group or whatever? How do you set that up or identify, what your vision is of where you're going to have some control or active involvement in the process?
Well, that's a great question, Joe, because that's one of the main reasons for having a doc plan is to make sure that those boundaries are crisply defined. And the way we do it is to have a give and take with the rest of the team. And so, for example, we say, what about error messages? That's part of what the customer sees. Is the development team just going to handle those? Would they like some involvement from my team in terms of editorial support? Or would they like a greater level of involvement where we actually craft those messages so that they're helpful and assist the user and become part of the UA itself? So we really have a dialogue, and a lot of times I'll be the one to bring up those things. Oh, and everyone else says, I never thought of that. Gee, let's talk about it. But I'll bring up those items and propose a way of doing things, and the team will either agree or not agree, and we'll talk about it. And in the end, we'll have a scope that's very clearly defined, and everyone knows what's going to happen as the project moves along.
And then do you have cross-departmental meetings related to that? So like areas that might not be hierarchically part of the
Hmm.
docs team?
Oh, yes. In fact, the boundaries are melting between the teams. There may not be a docs team per se. There may be a few individuals doing the docs that are organizationally part of the other team or several teams. So yes, we have a lot of cross-departmental communication and, if necessary, meetings to make sure that it all works out.
Well, one of the other areas that I know you work with is teams, distributed teams. Maybe talk a little bit about that. Explain what you mean by that, and that's be one of your topics at the conference, and what you have to deal with respect to that
Okay.
topic.
Sure. Well, just a couple of examples. I'm working on a couple of projects right now. One of them, the development team is in Arizona and Mexico. Um, there are some members of the information or tech pubs team in the Midwest in Minnesota, I believe it is. Sometimes I'm not even sure where they are. I just keep track of the time zones so I know when to communicate with them. Of course, you've got me on the East Coast. And so we've got people all over. We've got, as we talked about before, uh, people working on customer-facing content like error messages, tutorials, integrated help, as well as manuals. And so you have these very heterogeneous teams that are located in different places. That was an easy one, by the way, because we're all within 3 time zones. Another project I'm working on, we coordinate with a team in Budapest, Hungary. And the main product developers are in New Jersey, and they work for a different company. So in the past, where you would have a tech pubs team or a UA team that was co-located in the same place, they saw each other every day. They all worked for the same company. Today, you have teams that are literally all over the world. I've worked with teams in India and China, and that's very challenging in terms of time zones, especially the Chinese. The Indians, it turns out, they go to work late in the day, so they're still in the office when I come on in the morning, and so it's easier to work with them. But you accommodate. You have to understand that culturally they're different. They have different expectations. If you say to um, some cultural groups, if you say I see or I understand, they may take that as meaning I agree with you, and that's not necessarily the case. You have to be aware of those nuances. You have to be aware that many people on the team are contractors. They're working for other companies. They don't know the corporate culture. They don't know the nuts and bolts things like how do I fill out my timesheet necessarily. And you need to be able to help them or at least know the right direction to point them. Um, they won't know all of the jargon on the project, all of those little three-letter acronyms. So you have to be very careful to explain things. So if you're aware of those things, you can plan to deal with them. It won't work every single time. There'll be snafus sometime, but if you keep on top of it as the manager and you have a plan in mind to deal with those things when they come along, you can smooth it over. I think if everyone on the team knows that we're all pulling together, we're all trying, nobody's trying to mess things up, they're pretty good natured and pretty forgiving when it comes down to it. Um, but it's a great deal of a challenge when you think of the old days, certainly when I started my career, when we were all in the same location, we chatted in the break room, we knew each other pretty well, we all had the same objectives, mostly the same backgrounds, certainly the same culture, and that's just not the case anymore. And a lot of times I've never even met these people face to face, just on a Skype call or through email. We use a lot of email. And these are all issues that we have to think about. And as a manager, again, you can anticipate these issues. There are some best practices for dealing with them, and always have a plan for when something doesn't work, how to recover.
And when you're working with, I know when I've had to do work with, say, people in India, where you have that, full 12-hour time change. Like you said, somebody gets up early, somebody stays late. It is. Does that become like a routine that you have to get used to? Because I've only done it. I only do relatively short-term contracts with
Mhm.
most clients. But I mean, how do you fit that into your life schedule if you have to regularly have those meetings? Does it just become a part of what you do?
Well, it kind of does. Hopefully, you only have those meetings once or twice a week. So maybe you know that every Tuesday you're going to get up a little early. It helps if you're working from home or from a nearby office so that you can almost wear your pajamas to the meeting. Um, and but you also do get used to the idea of okay, I'm going to look at my email first thing in the morning, and the ones that are from India or from Eastern Europe, I'm going to address those first because maybe that person's still at the office and we can actually accomplish something. So yeah, you do get into a habit. You notice things like that, and after a while, I'm not going to say it becomes second nature, but it just becomes part of the job.
All right, great. Well, yeah, it was good to be able to have a chat with you about this, and I'll see you in about 6 weeks when I get to Charleston, and look forward to that.
I look forward to it too, Joe. Thanks for taking the time today.
All right, thanks a lot, Larry.
Bye bye.